Good night, everyone. Hi, Miriam. Hi, Jerry. Hi, Baruch. Who knows the, do you know the Torah portion this week?
Behar.
How do you say it?
Behar.
Behar, yes, on the mount. Let me share the screen. It's really, it's only one chapter, so it's a very short share, but it's filled. It's got a lot in it.
1 to 26 too.
Pardon? Yes, from 25, 1 to 26, 2. Okay.
And then they had the bullfrog after Jeremiah.
Jeremiah was a bullfrog, yes, but this was a prophet, Jeremiah. Okay, you ready? Brian, you want to put yourself on mute? Because you have people coming in and out of your room. So you can unmute yourself if you have something to say. Otherwise, leave it. Let's leave it on mute. Okay, so here it says, V'daber Yud He Vav He El Moshe Behar Sinai Le'amor. And the Lord, Yud He Vav He, spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai. Speak to the Israelite people and say to them, when you enter the land that I am giving you, the land shall observe a Shabbat rest, a day of rest. Just like we are to have a day of rest once a week, the land has to have a day of rest every 7th year. Okay, it's not the same as for us, it's every 7 days. For the land, it's like saying that the land is a living being. God owns this land, and even though we sing this land is my land, it's really God's land. 6 years you may sow your field, and 6 years you may prune your vineyard and gather in the yield. But in the 7th year, the land shall have a Sabbath of complete rest. And the Sabbath belongs to Yud He Vav He, the Lord. You shall not sow your field or prune your vineyard. You shall not reap the aftergrowth. In other words, whatever grows after they have stopped planting, you shall not reap the aftergrowth of your harvest or gather the grapes of your untrimmed vine. We're not to work the land in any way. It has to be a year of complete rest for the land. But you may eat whatever the land during its Shabbat will produce. So in other words, in that 7th year, it will continue to produce, and the people were still able to eat from it, not only them, but their male and female slaves, their hired, and the stranger among them, the gerim here, gerim imecha, who live with you. And your cattle, so the animals and the beasts in your land, may also eat its yield. Whatever the land was going to give, it would be a free-for-all for everyone. Then it continues with, that was the Shemitah, it's called the Shemitah. Now we're going to go into the topic called the Yovel, the Jubilee. You shall count off 7 weeks of years. 7 times 7 years, which is 49, so that the period of 7 weeks of years gives you a total of 49 years. Then in the following year, in the 50th year, I was just picturing this, in the 50th year, all throughout the land of Israel, they would sound the shofar in loud blasts. In the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month, the day of Yom Kippur, you shall have the horn sounded throughout your land, and you shall separate the 50th year. You shall proclaim release throughout the land for all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you. Each of you shall return to your holdings, whatever possession you had, and each of you shall return to your families. Now, when I read this, I thought it was amazing, because whenever we think of the Day of Atonement, we always think of a day of solemn, a solemn day where we are to afflict our souls, where to, in modern day, we fast on this day, even though the Torah doesn't tell us to. But here, on this Day of Atonement, the shofars would blast all throughout Israel on that day, and the 50th year would be set apart. Now, the reason was there would be a release. Imagine if you owed money and you went into debt and you had to sell your property in order to pay your debt back. In the 50th year, your property would come back to you. And if you had to sell your possessions would be giving back to you. If you had to sell yourself to go and live as a servant in another family, you would return to your own family. This was the Yovel. Can you imagine the joy in that 50th year? It shall be a jubilee for you. You're not to sow nor reap the aftergrowth and harvest of the untrimmed vines, the same as the Shemitah, for it is a Yovel. It shall be holy to you. In other words, you need to separate that day from all the rest, and you may only eat the growth that comes directly from the field. In this year of Jubilee, each of you shall return to your possessions. And when you sell property to your neighbor or buy anything from your neighbor, you shall not wrong. Oh, excuse me. You shall not wrong one another. In other words, be honest. Don't cheat your neighbors. Justice is what God wants from us. In buying from your neighbor, you shall deduct only for the number of years since the Jubilee. In other words, if you had a property and you had to buy it back from your neighbor, you could deduct the amount of years that the neighbor had it in from the buying price. And in selling to you, that person shall charge you only for the remaining years of the crops. In other words, if you had land, during those years, you would be able to, how can I explain this? You would be able to take off the money for the crops that remained in those years. I'm not sure I'm making it clear because I'm not sure my brain is understanding this as clearly as it should be. The more such years, the higher the price you pay. The fewer such years, the lower the price. So the longer that they had the land, the higher we had to pay them back. And we would deduct, with the land, we would deduct the crops. The fewer the years, the lower the price. For what is being sold to you is a number of harvests. Do not wrong one another, but fear your God, for I, the Lord, am your God. And I wonder today amongst our people, how many of us wrong our neighbor, a friend, a relative in our community. God is watching. And when we wrong one another, when we cheat one another, there will be a price to pay. Look what he says here. You shall observe my laws, in other words, my hukotai, my hukim, and faithfully keep my mishpatim, so that you may live upon the land in security. The land shall yield its fruit, and you shall eat your fill, and you shall live upon it in security. Would you say that we're living in security in Israel today? Is this land secure?
No.
Then maybe it's because we are not observing his chukim and his mishpatim. And the chukim, when we talk about the 10 Commandments, remember, the chukim are the middle two about Shabbat and honoring our parents. And the last 5 are the mishpatim. Do not murder. Do not steal from your neighbor. Do not take your neighbor's wife. Do not speak gossip about them. Do not destroy their character. And do not covet anything that they have. When we do these things, God will not allow us to live upon the land in security. what I remember over and over and over, he says, and we read this a few weeks ago, that those who lived in the land of Canaan before we took over the land, they were so evil that God spit them out, wanted them out of the land, because the land belongs to God. It's his property. We cannot buy or sell that land. We cannot even give it back. They want the land back, the so-called Palestinians, the Arab nations, but the land doesn't belong to them. It belongs to God, and we are to take care of it. And should you ask, because we get nervous about how are we going to survive during this period of time, because remember, on the sixth day, on the sixth year, he was going to provide enough for the following 3 years. It's what it says here. And should you ask, what are we to eat in the 7th year, if we may neither sow nor gather in our crops? I will command my blessing upon you in the 6th year so much that it shall yield a crop sufficient for 3 years. Look what he said he would do. We don't have to worry. In other words, if we just obey him, he will provide for us in ways that we can't even begin to imagine. All we have to do is obey him. And the bottom line is to trust. When you sow in the 8th year, you will still be eating the old grain from that crop, because in the 7th year, we had to leave it alone. In the 8th year, we had to sow. That's when we planted. And in the 9th year, we could harvest. You'll be eating the old until the 9th year, until its crop comes in. But the land must not be sold beyond reclaim, for the land is mine. You are but strangers, resident with me. That's why God wants us to understand that the strangers who come to live with us need to be taken care of in the same way that he takes care of us as strangers. Throughout that land that you hold, you must provide for the redemption of the land, for the Shemitah. We need to leave that land alone. If one of your kins is in dire straits and has to sell part of a holding, the nearest relative shall come and redeem what that relative sold. But if someone has no one, no family member to redeem, but prospers and acquires himself enough to redeem with, the year since its sale shall be computed, and the difference shall be refunded to the party to whom it was sold, so that the person returns to that holding. If that person lacks sufficient funds to recover it, what was sold shall remain with the purchaser until the Jubilee, and in the Jubilee year, it shall be released, so that the person returns to his possessions. If any party sells a dwelling house in a walled city, in other words, if he lives in more of a city, not just open land, it may be redeemed until a year has elapsed since the sale, and the redemption period shall be a year. If it is not redeemed before a full year has elapsed, the house in the walled city shall remain with the purchaser beyond reclaim throughout the ages. It shall not be released in the Jubilee. So it seems that there's a different law for those who live in the city than those who live in the open field in the countries, in the fields. But houses in villages that have no encircling walls shall be classed as open country. They may be redeemed, and they shall be released throughout the Jubilee. This is, for me, a chukim, a chok. We don't understand why. It could be that the rabbis have some understanding of it. I don't know why. Maybe it has something to do with, again, trusting him to protect us in unwalled and when we have no walls around us, We have to rely upon him, like he speaks about in Zechariah. As for the cities of the Levites, the houses in the cities it holds, the Levi shall forever have the right of redemption. The such property as may be redeemed from Levi, houses sold in a city it holds, shall be released through the Jubilee. For the houses in the cities of Levi are its holdings among the Israelites. But the unenclosed land about its cities cannot be sold, for that is its holding for all time. If your relative, being in dire straits, comes under your authority and are held by you as though a resident alien, let him live by your side. If he's a relative and he's lost everything and he's coming under your authority, he's being held by you as if he were a servant. Let them live by your side. Do not exact advance or accrued interest. We're not to charge interest for any loans among our kinsmen, our relatives, our friends, those close to us in our community. But fear your God, because really God is the keeper of everything. He owns it all. Let your relative live by your side in that way. Do not lend your money with advance interest, nor give your food with accrued interest. I, the Lord, am your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan to be your God. He repeats this throughout the Torah over and over. It's the first commandment, reminding us who our God is. He is the God of history. He is the God of action. We can trust him. We know that he brought us out of the land of Egypt. We know that he gave us the land of Canaan, and we know that he is our God. And we need to learn to trust him, and that is a process. It takes time to trust, especially when many of us are born in a home where we've had many problems and we haven't felt safe. We haven't understood that God was always with us. If your kin under you continues in straits and must be given over to you, do not subject them to the treatment of a slave. Remaining with you as a hired worker or bound laborer, they shall serve you only until the year of Jubilee of the Yovel. Then they, along with any of their children, shall be set free of your authority. They shall go back to their family and return to their ancestral possessions, their holdings. For they are my servants, whom I freed from the land of Egypt. They may not give themselves over into servitude. You shall not rule over them ruthlessly. You shall fear your God. Now remember, he's talking about our kinsmen. The law is a little different for the slaves. This is about our relatives and those who have come to live with us. Such male and female slaves as you may have, it is from the nations around you that you may acquire male and female slaves. You may also buy them from among the children of alien residents among you, and from their families that are among you, whom they begot in your land. They shall be your property. You may keep them as a possession for your children after you, for them to inherit as property for all time. Such you may treat as slaves. But as for your Israelite kin, we are not slaves. No one shall rule ruthlessly over our own kin. We have to treat them differently. If a resident alien, this is not those who choose to be among us, if a resident ger, a stranger, among you has prospered, and your relative is in trouble, if he comes under that one's authority and is given over to the stranger among us or to a member of his family, your relative shall have the right of redemption even after having been given over. Typically, a brother shall do the redeeming. or an uncle's son shall do the redeeming. Anyone in the family who is of the same flesh shall do the redeeming. Or having prospered, your formerly impoverished kin may do the redeeming. The total shall be computed with the purchaser as from the year of being given over to the other until the Jubilee year. The price of sale shall be applied to the number of years, as though it were for a term as a hired labor under the other's authority. If many years remain, your relative shall pay back for the redemption in proportion to the purchase price. And if few years remain until the Jubilee, Yovel, so shall it be computed. Payment shall be made for the redemption according to the years involved. One shall be under the other's authority, as a laborer hired by the year, and the other shall not rule ruthlessly in your sight. If not redeemed in any of those ways, that person, along with any children, shall go free in the Jubilee year. For it is to me that the Israelites are servants. They are my servants, whom I freed from the land of Egypt. I, your God. I am your God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. You shall not make idols for yourself, nor set up for yourself carved images or pillars, or placed figured stones in your land to worship upon. For I, the Lord, am your God. You shall keep my Sabbaths and venerate my sanctuary, my Bet HaMikdosh. It is mine, the Lord's. Now I want to share another thing here. This is the portion called Jeremiah in Jeremiah. This is Jeremiah speaking to God. O my sovereign God, you made heaven and earth with your great might and outstretched arm. Nothing is too wondrous for you. You show kindness to the 1,000th generation, but visit the guilt of the parents upon the children after them. O great and mighty God, whose name is the Lord of hosts, wondrous in purpose and mighty in deed, whose eyes observe all the ways of mortals, so as to repay each one according to their ways, and with the proper fruit of their deeds. You displayed signs and marvels in the land of Egypt with lasting effect, and you won renown in Israel and among humankind to this very day. You freed your people Israel from the land of Egypt with signs and marvels and wonders, with a strong hand and an outstretched arm, and with great terror. You gave them this land that you had sworn to their fathers to give them, a land filling with milk and honey, flowing with milk and honey. And they came and took possession of it. Now listen to this. But they did not listen to you or follow your teaching. What is the word for teaching here? Toratecha, your Torah. They did nothing of what you commanded them to do. Therefore, you have caused all this misfortune to befall them. Now, this took place with Jeremiah when we went into Babylon, the first desecration, destruction of the temple. And that was our first dispersion. We did not keep the Shemitah of the land. We were corrupt in the land. We did nothing of what God commanded us to do. And we're doing the same thing today. Here are the siege mounds raised against the city to storm it. And the city, because of the sword and famine and pestilence, is at the mercy of Hamas, who are attacking it. What you threatened has come to pass, as you see. I changed, obviously, Chaldeans for Hamas, because it's the same story all over again. Yet you, my sovereign God, said to me, buy the land for money and call in witnesses. When the city is at the mercy of the Chaldeans, then the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah. Behold, I am God, the God of all flesh. Is anything too wondrous for me? So we can see that the same story gets repeated over and over in our history. You know, I've been wanting to take some time, and I just haven't done it. I've been wanting to take some time so that we could see how throughout history, when we have been disobedient, God allows the enemy to come against us. When we were disobedient here with the Shemitah for 490 years, we didn't keep the Shemitah of the land. We didn't allow the land to lie fallow. And it really has nothing to do with crop rotation, with the fact that the soil needed to be renewed or replenished, like people who are involved in agriculture will say. It had to do with trusting him. When God gives us things that we need to obey, and we don't trust him, and we do things our own way, he allows the enemy to come against us. But when the enemy comes against us, and they treat us the way Hamas is doing now, the way Hitler did before the last war, the way Stalin did during the pogroms all out throughout Ukraine and Eastern Europe, and we go back with the Spanish Jews and the Spanish Inquisition. We can go back to all the dispersions. You know, when I was reading about the story of Hanukkah, before the king of Egypt, before Antiochus came and attacked Israel, it said there was a band of renegades, Jewish renegades, who said to the people, you know, ever since we separated from the Greeks, all these problems have come upon us. So let's join with them. Let's go and ask to build a gym in Jerusalem. Now, the gyms were not like the YMCA or the YWHA. These were outdoor gyms where the Greeks worshiped the body. And the Jews at that time wanted to be able to partake in these same games. They wanted to assimilate with the Greeks. That's why we got into trouble. It said, let us follow them. We're seeing exactly the same thing now. When I look at all these groups that are standing up and they're saying from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, I see a group of Jews who are standing with the Palestinians. I see liberal Jews, leftist Jews wearing that same scarf that Arafat wore. I say, what is it with these people? Don't they see? That's why Hosea says our people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. We don't see what we are doing to ourselves. And that is an absolute tragedy for us, because over and over the story is the same. And even though we disobey, God is a God of mercy. He knows our heart. He's always walking with us. He will never leave us, forsake us. I see that going, you know, with things happening in my life when I feel distraught over things, and I feel that I just sometimes don't even want to go on. I don't want to continue because it's so frustrating. I just ask God to help me, and I get this renewed sense of his protection. And you know, when I think of before in Europe, they were able to escape to Israel to it, you know, even though escaping to Israel is not an easy thing because we have so many enemies all around us. But today, if we think, where can we go? And Miriam and you and I were talking about it this afternoon.
Yeah.
It's like we have to see that we are in Goshen. And Goshen was part of Egypt where Joseph placed us, where we were safe from the plagues. We watched the plagues hit Egypt in the same way that we today, when we are obedient and when we truly work hard to be obedient, and it's not always easy. But like our rabbi always said, God is a God of beginning again. And all we have to do is go to him. Lord, I have failed. Please help me. And he somehow steps right in and helps us and gives us a renewed strength and a renewed faith. But it does take a step of faith.
What you were saying about Goshen and God protecting us there, I remember we were talking about how each one of us is like a microcosm or a small Israel, each one of us, and in our own lives, not only corporately as Israel, we are responsible for our own actions in our own lives.
Right.
And we are to observe these commandments for us personally, as well as the whole country of Israel.
Right.
So we are like little Israels, and God will, set promises to bless even us individually. Do you hear that thunder? You have that at your house?
No, not yet, but I hear it raining outside.
Okay.
Yeah, now I just heard thunder. Yeah, we're getting a storm. I hope I don't lose electricity. But
Right.
just before we finish on that note, Miriam, oh, I just lost my train of thought.
Talking about being Israel as each one
Oh,
of us.
about the land. It talks about the land being God's. It belongs to him. And it's as if the land is alive.
Right.
And, there are indigenous people who worship the land. They almost say it's like Mother Earth. And they understand that in the land is life, and that land can be transferred over, as you say, into our lives. It's like the Shemitah and the Yovel are related with the Shabbat. The Shabbat it is the day that God gives us to refresh ourselves, to be renewed. It's like every week we have one day of complete rest, away from our problems, away from our chores, away from our work, and we could just give that day to him, and we live longer that way. It's like we have a day of vacation every single week. And then every seventh year, in the same way that we do this for our land, this body is like our land. We have to take care of it. Feed it. Pardon?
It's raining over here too, where I'm at.
Yes, but just like the land, the body also needs to be taken care of. And then in the 50th year, what happened?
Sorry, did you hear that?
No, I didn't hear
It's
it.
like a cannonball.
Yeah, I just heard it now.
Oh, well, no, here, I thought my glass was going to shatter.
Yeah, wow.
Oh my
It's
God.
really big. Well, I think the electricity will go off soon. So, but it's just, instead of talking about the storm, let me finish with this, because maybe God is raging right now with what's going on this earth. But in the same way that the land needs to be released from the things that are destroying it, like Israel needed to trust and to obey God, and then he would take care of his land. He would take care of this land, and we would be protected. We need to take care of this land. And the land that's within us has to do with the things that about ourselves that need to be released. We all have a past. We've all suffered in some way in our childhood. Many of us have gone through a personal Holocaust in our own lives. And when we bring these things to God and we release them by speaking them, by acknowledging them, there's a release that we feel in ourselves, because God wants, in the same way that he wanted the land to that everybody would enjoy the land, the stranger among us, the animals, the cattle, everybody would enjoy the produce of the land. We are to enjoy the produce of this land. So what God is saying to us, are you being the very best that you can be? Allow me to help you to be that person, because I've given you gifts. I've given you everything you need to live this life in peace and in comfort and in joy. But when we disobey his commandments, we take away that ability within us. And that's, the message of the Shabbat, the Yovel, and the Shemitah are all related. And we'll hear more about that when it comes to Shabbat. We'll hear whoa, it's right above us now.
Wow.
I
Okay,
saw
it's
the
moving
flash
your way.
and it's right above us. So you know what? Let's say goodnight, because I have a feeling that my electricity is going to go off any minute and I don't want to lose this message. So anyway, I want to wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom. I hope you enjoyed the message for tonight, and we'll see you, God willing, again next week.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Miriam.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, Jerry. Bye, Baruch.
Bye, everybody.